Hello, it's Friday, it's 10 o'clock, I'm Chloe Tilley. Another U-turn on universal credit. The government's announced today that families with more than 2 children born before April 2017 won't now have their benefits capped.
I want to make sure that our welfare system is compassionate, and that seemed like a good example of making sure that we don't introduce that. So we've scrapped the extension of the 2-child policy. Another change I'm making is making sure that we don't ask Parliament for permission for the full rollout of universal credit until I've convinced people of the benefit of it.
We'll get reaction from families who receive universal credit. Do get in touch if you're affected. A man who found out his 3 grown-up sons weren't his after being diagnosed with a disease that leaves you infertile since birth tells this programme the news left him feeling suicidal.
It was suddenly like being hit by a sledgehammer. I just went, oh my God. You know, you suddenly realise that children aren't yours.
Millionaire Richard Mason says he doesn't regret suing their mum, even though it means 2 of his children won't now speak to him. You can watch that full interview at around 10:15. And a tearful Andy Murray tells a news conference that next week's Australian Open could be the last tournament of his career as he struggles to recover from hip surgery.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure I'm able to play through the pain, you know, for another 4 or 5 months.
We'll get reaction from former British women's #1 Annabel Croft. Hello and welcome to the programme. We're live until 11 o'clock this morning. Now, have you got more than 2 children and are on universal credit so you can't claim benefits for them all? Well, today the government has announced a U-turn on its multiple child policy, saying everybody who's got 3 or more children born before April 2017 will now be able to claim payments for each child. So is this going to affect you? If so, do get in touch with us. You can use the hashtag #VictoriaLive. You can email us. If you're happy for us to contact us, if you want to take part in the programme, do please include your phone number in that message. And remember that if you do text, you're going to be charged at the standard network rate. Right, here's Anita now with a summary of the day's news. Morning, Anita.
Morning, Chloe. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Around 15,000 families with 3 or more children will not have their universal credit capped in another government U-turn on the benefit payment. The 2-child limit came into effect in April 2017, but didn't initially apply to claimants whose children were born before that date. The exemption was due to end next month, but will now continue. In a dramatic and tearful news conference overnight, Andy Murray has announced his intention to retire from tennis. At the news conference in Melbourne, the former world #1, who has been struggling with a hip injury, said he hopes to bow out after Wimbledon, but also warned he could be in too much pain to continue playing following next week's Australian Open. A review of decades of scientific research has confirmed the long-held belief that eating a high-fibre diet reduces the risk of heart attacks, strokes and other diseases. Fruit and vegetables, as well as plenty of nuts and seeds, are being recommended after the major review published in The Lancet. The analysis also expresses concern that popular low-carbohydrate diets could be putting people's health at risk. Many US government employees will miss their first paycheck today as the shutdown enters its 20th day. President Trump has said he has an absolute right to declare a national emergency so he can get the $5 billion he's demanding for his proposed wall across the country's southern border with Mexico. He's refusing to approve government funding unless the US Congress gives him the money. Police in Las Vegas have issued a warrant for a DNA sample from the footballer Cristiano Ronaldo. They're investigating rape allegations against the Portugal, Juventus and former Manchester United star. His lawyer has insisted it's a very standard request. Ronaldo denies assaulting Catherine Mayorga at a Las Vegas hotel in 2009. New research suggests that an increasing number of secondary schools in England are in financial deficit. A report by the independent think tank, the Education Policy Institute, says that a third of secondaries had overspent their budgets by the end of last year. The government insists that spending on pupils is rising. Facebook is to roll out a team of independent fact-checkers in the UK next week in the site's ongoing battle with fake news. The social media giant, which has been criticised in recent years due to users spreading misinformation online, will be working with fact-checking charity Full Fact to flag content which is deemed as incorrect or misleading. Award-winning BBC television and radio presenter Diane Oxbury has died following a short illness. She was 51. Diane became well-known nationally on Radio 1, working alongside Simon Mayo and Steve Wright. After studying meteorology, she became the weather presenter for BBC North West Tonight in 1994. The winner of the BBC Music Sound of 2019 is Octavian, a 23-year-old rapper from London who was previously homeless as a teenager. The 23-year-old began to attract widespread attention after high-profile musicians began sharing his music on social media. The award goes to performers who've never had a top 10 hit and aims to boost the profile of new music talent. Previous winners include Adele and Sam Smith. And they've done rather well for themselves, haven't they? That is a summary of the news. Back to you, Chloe.
Thank you very much, Anita. Now, coming up just before 10:30, three times Grand Slam winner Andy Murray has broken down in tears at a news conference, saying the Australian Open next week might be the final tournament of his career because he can't continue to play through the pain after his hip surgery. Well, we're going to hear from the former British women's #1, Annabel Croft, to get reaction. So do stay with us and do get in touch with us throughout the programme on all of the stories that we're talking about. You can use the hashtag Victoria Live. You can email us, victoria@bbc.co.uk. If you want to come onto the programme, please include your phone number, and do remember that if you text us, you're going to be charged at the standard network rate. Lots of you already getting in touch with us about the universal credit story that we're covering this morning. Paul on Twitter said, how is it a U-turn when the policy hasn't changed? They've just taken some people out of the net. The only way to fix universal credit is to scrap it completely. Another text here, an anonymous text, says, I agree with the 2-child cap on benefits. It's time that those on benefits realise that it isn't a bottomless pot of money. The working public can't go to their employees and get a wage increase each time a child is born into their family. They have to learn to stretch their income to cover the extra costs. This is a decision that should be considered if you choose to have more children. And Agnes on Facebook says it's time to scrap it, that's universal credit, and start again. People are being driven to despair trying to navigate the Department of Work and Pensions website. Not being able to speak to someone who actually knows what they're doing is an absolute joke. Well, if you're affected by those changes, if you have more than 2 children who were born before April 2017, and it means that you are going to get more money for those other children, get in touch with us this morning. Be interested to hear your thoughts on that and what difference it will actually make. Well, in the next few minutes, the Work and Pensions Secretary Amber Rudd is going to announce major changes to universal credit. You'll remember it's where 6 benefits for working age people are merged into a single payment. Well, there's been this U-turn on a decision to make the 2-child benefit cap retrospective. So all children born before April 2017, when the welfare cap was announced, are going to be supported by universal credit instead of only the first 2 children in a family. Now, the government says this is going to help around 15,000 families a year. And instead of all claimants on the old system being moved on to universal credit, there will be a 12-month pilot scheme where just 10,000 people will move. Only after this will MPs be asked to vote on moving all 3 million people who claim the relevant benefits will move across to universal credit. But the government's still facing pressure to reduce the 5 weeks that new claimants have to wait before they receive any money at all, something which thousands of families say has plunged them into poverty. Well, we're going to bring that news conference by Amber Rudd to you live. We're expecting it, in the next few minutes. But first of all, let's have a conversation with people affected by this. And also Heidi Allen, who is a Conservative MP and a member of the Work and Pensions Committee. She's been very outspoken, a critic of the way that universal credit has been working. Also with us is Maria Amos, who has been on universal credit since 2016. And she is going to speak to us in the next few minutes, but we're going to cross over now to Amber Rudd, who is speaking live at a job centre in London. Let's have a listen.
With the principles of helping people into work, making work pay, and providing support in times of need. And I want universal credit to retain that support as we deliver it in practice. This means delivering it in a way that meets the needs of claimants who come from every conceivable background and each with the potential to achieve their ambitions. In welfare, there is no one-size-fits-all solution, and universal credit offers the opportunity to move away from that. It must treat individuals as individuals, and I will set out the first steps I will take to achieve that today. Our welfare system is based upon three fundamental principles. First, work. Those who can, should, and those who cannot should be protected from poverty. Second, work should always pay. And third, the system should be fair for the taxpayers who pay for it, and fair to those who receive it, and fair to future generations who do not deserve to become trapped in it. As a nation, I believe we all want a decent safety net. If you're facing a difficult moment in life, the state should be there to help you. Whether that's becoming unemployed, falling ill, or facing bereavement, nobody should find themselves alone in desperate circumstances. But it is vital that people are supported by this safety net, not trapped beneath it. It is there to help people get through difficult times. It's not meant to be a mode of long-term subsistence for those who can work. For the vast majority of people, it is ultimately work, not benefits, which provides the route to a better life. And the welfare system should clear a path for that route, not block it. Work gives purpose, dignity, security, the opportunity to provide for your family, progress in earnings, and build a fulfilling life. In this respect, the old system was broken. It's why we had to reform it. Now, despite what some people suggest, the legacy system, 6 different benefits from 3 government departments, was not a utopia that we should return to. Indeed, 700,000 claimants on that system are currently failing to claim their full entitlement because they find it so confusing. These people, some of the most vulnerable in society, are failing to receive on average £285 a month. Under the old regime, claimants who moved off benefits into full-time work lost welfare payments almost immediately, which resulted in effective tax rates of up to 90% on their income. As an MP, I frequently met people who wanted to earn more but were too scared to take on extra hours, knowing they'd have so little to gain.
Now, we're going to keep an ear across the Work and Pensions Secretary, Amber Rudd, who's speaking at a job centre in London, making that announcement about universal credit. Any new announcements that she makes, we will bring to you here. But in the meantime, I want to introduce you to our guests who are with us. I was saying just before we cross to speak to Amber Rudd, Maria Amos is with us. She has been on universal credit since 2016 and has recently been having panic attacks because she's been told she needs to manage that online. She doesn't have access to a computer. And is very concerned about that. We'll speak to her in a moment. Also with us is Emily Dorman-O'Gowan. She is a single mum who went on to universal credit after losing her job following a car crash in June 2017. Emily, I want to begin by speaking with you, if I may. Tell me what your experience has been like going on to universal credit.
Hi, Chloe. It's been absolutely terrifying. I'd like to pick up on something that Amber Rudd just mentioned, which was the protection from poverty for those who cannot work. That is exactly what is happening to those of us in a similar situation to myself. We are being thrown into poverty. From the moment that I went onto universal credit, I went into arrears on my rent, which is with a social housing group. It's affordable housing. I had a notice for repossession for about 8 months of last year as a result. I had huge council tax arrears due to valuation office delaying my valuation by 2 years, and I was taken to court by the county council for that because I was unable to pay it on universal credit. The idea that the universal credit is stopping people from falling under the system is an absolute joke. Again, that was something that Amber Rudd just highlighted. She said, we don't want people trapped. I'm trapped. There's just no question about it. And again, what she just said about the idea of people being effectively taxed up to 90% of their salary when coming off benefits, it's still happening with universal credit. If you don't know what your earnings are going to be from month to month, you don't know what your universal credit is going to be from month to month. And anything over the £190-something threshold that you're allowed to earn, you are then deducted 63% of your universal credit against whatever you're earning. So that vicious cycle is continuing.
Emily, as you're speaking, I can see that Maria is nodding away in Merseyside. Maria, have you had similar experiences?
Yes, I have. Hello. Hello, Chloe. Yes, I have. When I first went on to Universal Credit, I've worked all my life since I was 16. And my last job was in Chester Zoo. And when I finished that, it was only for 10 months. When I finished that and had to go and sign back on, I was put on Universal Credit. I live on my own. I had nothing for 5 weeks. I was on such poor money anyway. I had no savings. And then I was told to have nothing for 5 weeks. At the end of 5 weeks, all I had was water in my tap. People don't believe that, but that's all I had. So I decided to end my life. I didn't. A friend saved me. And then after 5 weeks, and the first thing they'd done when they paid me was take my council tax out of it and deducted council tax. I couldn't understand it. I really couldn't.
Maria, I want to put that point that you raised to Heidi Allen MP, who is with us, member of the Work and Pensions Select Committee. And I know that Heidi Allen, you have been very outspoken of the way universal credit has penalised people. But when you see this announcement from Amber Rudd today, she's talking about 15,000 families benefiting from getting payments if they have more than 2 children born before April 2017. But actually what Maria and Emily are talking about is it's still this 5-week wait before people are paid that is plunging people into poverty. If that was changed, that would help everybody, 3 million people on universal credit.
Totally, you're completely preaching to the converted, and I feel like I'm beginning to sound a bit like a stuck record because I keep saying that too. I think there's another thing as well, actually, too. There are lots of tweaks that need making with the universal credit, but you're right, the 5-week wait is one of the big ones, and I think the other one is the benefit freeze, because you'll know that benefits have been frozen for 4 years. There's 1 more year to run, but in that, when we set that policy, inflation was very low. But since then, inflation's gone up, wage rises have gone up, pension. I mean, literally everybody in the UK, apart from people on working age benefits, have seen their incomes rise. So I think it's 2 things. But the 5-week wait, you're absolutely right. And I mentioned this, in fact, in the House of Commons at the beginning of the week on Monday. I've been suggesting to successive Secretaries of State, and I have spoken to Amber very recently about it as well, maybe not for everybody, because if it was me that lost my job and I just needed a couple of months to get myself sorted, I'd be fine because I have, some savings. But I think for people who literally have no financial resilience at all, the advance payments which government has made available, literally on day 1, if you're struggling, you can have an advance payment. But of course, that's a loan, which you then have to pay back over time. And all the, you can pay it back every year, and that in theory sounds fine, but when it's being deducted from a pretty small amount anyway, it can be crippling for people.
Absolutely, Heidi. As you're saying that, I can see that Maria's doing eyes heavenwards, and I can also see that Emily is shaking her head. Because, Emily, that's the problem, isn't it? That if you get that advance payment, it's effectively a loan which you still have to pay back.
Yeah.
This needs to be really strongly clarified, Chloe. The loan system, when you ring and ask for a loan, the person you speak to on the phone tells you what they think the maximum is that you are able to borrow. And they then set the timetable for the repayments. So, for example, I think borrowed about £130 from them initially, and I had to pay back £30 a month. So with all due respect to what Heidi's just said, the idea of being able to pay over the long term is a nonsense, okay? That is not the way it works.
Kind of finish what I wanted to say, but...
And you're only allowed to borrow what they think you can repay. So, you know, that's a real grey area.
So if I could, what I was going to come on to say, and I was sort of starting to allude to that, the amount that's taken away is from not a very generous starting pot, so it can be absolutely crippling for people. So what I've asked Amber to look at is that first advance payment that you get. I think that should be your first payment, not your loan, your first payment that isn't then clawed back. It isn't a loan. And then, you know, if they've made a best guess as to what they think your monthly payment will be, if it's wrong at the end of the first month, they can tweak it up or down, and then you're in the cycle then of the universal credit each month. And then at the end, let's say in 12, 18 months, you're back on your feet again and you can come off UC, take it back then, right at the very end, like your last payment. I suppose not quite the same, but a bit of an analogy is you've got a deposit and your rent, you don't get your deposit back rather than paying your last month's rent, that sort of thing. And I think if we were to take that loan repayment problem away, as you've just very eloquently described, I think that would transform UC for a lot of people.
Because Emily, this was a problem for you, wasn't it? It led to you having to go to and use food banks, didn't it?
Yes, it did. I think I used the food bank in my town for about 8 weeks, which is so humbling and humiliating at the same time. I mean, for strangers to turn up on your doorstep and deliver you food is an act of kindness that I can't adequately describe it. But by the same token, you're then living on food which is full of things that are bad for you, and you're told that you shouldn't be eating, like sodium nitrite in packed meats and things like that.
Emily, forgive me for jumping in, because I want to head back over to listen to Amber Rudd, the Work and Pensions Secretary, because she is just talking at the moment about private landlords and renting. Let's have a listen.
So they can request, where necessary, for their tenants' rent to be paid directly to them. And I'll consider what else we can do, because I'm determined to help people keep in their homes. I'm also looking at what more can be done to support those who find monthly payments too difficult to manage. We need to go back to first principles, reviewing how we identify claimants who might struggle to manage on monthly payments, and ensuring work coaches are moving them on to more frequent payments where necessary. I've asked Job Centre Plus to test how we can improve the provision of more frequent payments for new claimants. Those pilots will start shortly, and once we've evidence of what works, we will roll it out further. We must ensure that provision of frequent payments doesn't slow the system for users who don't require them, but I believe we can offer this facility more widely so those in genuine need can take it up more readily. Indeed, some of the most exciting results we've seen from Universal Credit have resulted from personalised and targeted support reaching the right people. This is particularly true for groups who have historically been left out of the labour market. Women can never be truly free until they have economic independence.
So that is the Work and Pensions Secretary, Amber Rudd, speaking live at a job centre in London. We're just trying to clarify there if she is saying that rent could be requested to be paid directly to private landlords, because this has been a huge issue. And Maria, I can see you nodding away, because under the previous benefits, rent would go directly to the landlord rather than to the claimant, whereas now the claimant receives all of the money. Would you find it easier if your rent was taken out first before the money came to you?
Well, where I live now, my rent automatically goes to my housing association.
Because you're in social housing and they do that currently for social housing, but not private
I'm in an over 55s.
Right, OK.
But I also made sure that my rent went to them. If you give somebody a big amount of money and people have issues and you don't pay your rent, well, I don't ever want to be in that. So my rent automatically now, because I asked for it, to go straight there, you know?
Do you think that
my rent is paid now, so there's a worry off my head then, you know?
Yeah, that makes it easier for you. Emily, do you think it would be beneficial if that rent was automatically taken out before it got to a claimant?
This happened to me because of the notice of repossession that was hanging over me. Now, one of the first payments that I got from Universal Credit left me with less than £1,000 for a month, and I rang my social housing landlord and said to them, please can I pay you 400 instead of 520? this month because that £120 would mean the world to me. And on the back of that, they just went straight to Universal Credit and said, get the payments direct to us. So I personally feel there's a massive question mark over the direct deductions process, because who needs the money more? The landlords or the council tax, or the individual who needs to be able to eat and wash and be warm and feel secure.
Well, Emily, I can clarify that Amber Rudd, the Work and Pension Secretary, has just said that private landlords will be able to request that rent goes directly to them, which has been something that I know many people have been asking for. Heidi Allen MP, thank you for joining us. Thank you also to Maria Amos and also to Emily Dorman O'Gowan. If you're affected by that, if you are on Universal Credit and you're in private accommodation, would that help you if that money was taken out directly before it got to you? Get in touch with us. You can use the hashtag #VictoriaLive. Now, 4 working single mothers have won a High Court challenge over the Universal Credit Welfare Scheme, which they say has left them struggling financially because of the way their payments are calculated. Our correspondent Andy Moore is at the High Court. Andy, tell us more.
Well, this 20-page judgment was delivered just a few minutes before Amber Rudd got on her feet to make that speech about Universal Credit today. So at the very least, certainly an embarrassment for the government. And what the High Court has decided that these 4 women will be allowed judicial review, so they will be allowed a full hearing of their arguments in this case. But essentially, in shorthand, the government has lost today and the women have won at least the first stage of this case. They argued there was a fundamental problem with the way Universal Credit was not working for them. They said they were losing hundreds of pounds because of the vagaries of the way salaries are paid. Sometimes they were paid on the 31st. If there was a bank holiday, they'd be paid on another date. That meant that sometimes they were paid twice in 1 month, and then their Universal Credit went down drastically. Sometimes it was cut back altogether. Now, in this judgment, the judges say that the defendant, that's the Department for Work and Pensions, erred in treating the combined salary for those 2 months as earned income. So they're saying the Department for Work and Pensions got it wrong, and that's why the judicial review is allowed on that basis. So the Department for Work and Pensions will have to come up with a skeleton argument saying what they're going to do about it, how they intend to change the system, and there will be a full hearing on these issues next month here at the High Court.
Andy Moore speaking to us live from the High Court in London. Now, still to come, his pain and sadness. It was written all over his face, wasn't it? An emotional Andy Murray in tears as he said he fears the Australian Open could be the last tournament of his career. We'll get reaction from former British women's #1, Annabel Croft. Plus, I used to be my belly got full, now I got that milk. Plus, a year ago, he was penniless. Now rapper Octavian is the BBC's Sound of 2019, an award that's previously gone to the likes of Adele and Sam Smith. We're going to hear from him in the next half an hour. Now, a man who discovered after being diagnosed with the life-limiting illness cystic fibrosis that he couldn't be the father of his 3 sons because the condition causes lifelong infertility has told this programme the news left him feeling suicidal. Doctors revealed in 2016 that Richard Mason couldn't be the dad to the children, who are now 19 and 23. Richard sued his wife of 20 years, Kate, and they recently reached a settlement of £250,000, with her admitting she'd had an affair while the couple had been married. Well, we spoke to Richard and his current partner, Emma.
When he said to me, "You've got cystic fibrosis," I immediately thought, oh my God, my sister died of that at 29. And her death was very hard for me because with cystic fibrosis, you slowly suffocate on your own phlegm. And it took her 2 years to eventually waiting for a heart and lung transplant. And then she died on the operating theatre. So immediately I was just very saddened by that. But then when the discussion then turned to fertility, and he said, look, yourself and Emma, you know, you're going to have difficulty having children because you are, as a man with cystic fibrosis, infertile. It was suddenly like being hit by a sledgehammer. I just went, oh my God. You know, you suddenly realise that your children aren't yours. So I said, well...
immediately you knew the significance of what he just said to you?
Yeah.
Yes.
Both of you?
There were medical experts in the room, and, you know, it's impossible without IVF for a man with cystic fibrosis to have a baby.
So then I said, well, you must have the diagnosis wrong because I've already got 3 boys. But I sort of was like clutching at straws there. So after that, it became a complete blur for me because it was almost like, you know, I don't know if you've ever hit your head really, really hard and it's like a ringing and you just, you can't see anything that's going on around you, you can't think of anything that's going on around you. It's almost like you just have this ringing in your ears, and it's all the implications of everything as a result of that start, you know, flashing through your mind.
Like, what kind of questions are you then immediately asking yourself?
You just wanted to go straight to phone Kate, his ex-wife, say, Kate, spare me the dignity, just tell me the truth. Was there anyone else?
When I'd managed to compose myself, it was about an hour later, I sent her a text and I said, look, this text has been in the press, but it was actually repeated verbatim from what I sent to her, and it's still on my phone now. I said to her, look, I've just been diagnosed with cystic fibrosis. I'm not expecting you to be sympathetic about that, because she's a very hard person. But the reason I'm telling you is that the boys are not likely to have been fathered by me. Now, obviously, there's something's gone on. And if you are honest about it with me, I don't intend to sue you. And you can decide how you want to tell the boys. If you want me to be there at the same time, that's fine. But if you lie to me, then I will take action, and I'll decide how I'm telling the boys. And the immediate response I got back was, I am sympathetic, but whatever science says, those boys will always be yours.
Those boys will always be yours.
Which was
slightly different than saying you are definitely the dad. When you were diagnosed, your sons were 21 and the twins were 17, I think.
Yes.
When your then wife was pregnant on those occasions, did you ever suspect, have any inkling, ever think, oh, that's a bit odd, at the time of the pregnancy, through the birth, afterwards?
There was 1 or 2 occasions that after the boys were born, I thought that they didn't resemble me as much as, you know, you'd imagine that boys would.
They didn't look like you?
Well, they've got darker eyes than me. I'd have almost no body hair, and the boys have got very dark hairs on their legs and things like that. But around the time that she got pregnant, we'd been having unprotected sex for 7 years. Nothing had happened. Now, she always said to me, I have a tilted womb. I don't know what that is, but it means that it's harder for a woman to get pregnant. So we'd always thought it was her, and we'd gone for fertility treatment, or to see the GP to start the fertility process. And the GP said, well, the first thing that has to happen is you have to be tested, Mr. Mason, and then we test your wife. Now, it's likely to be 3 occasions of IVF that you're going to need. They're about £5,000 a time, so it's £15,000. But after that, there's a good chance you will have a baby. So when we went home, we both were working at Barclays at the time, and she said, look, you know, we've got our careers. We're both, I mean, yuppies was like in the 80s, you know, really like popular term for young people who were doing well in their careers. She said, we're both yuppies, let's just carry on with our careers and see how it goes. A few months later, she was pregnant. So I thought, oh my God, that's weird, because, you know, you often hear of people going for treatment and then suddenly naturally get pregnant. And she said, oh, it's just one of those things. So I did feel a little bit like that's a surprise, you know, because we go for to start the IVF, then decide not to, and she gets pregnant.
This is, I mean, you've described the turmoil, you've described it feeling like you were hit with a sledgehammer. Did you consider taking your own life?
Many times. The consultant said to me once, cystic fibrosis kicks in, and I'm one of the oldest people in the UK with cystic fibrosis, and probably the oldest person ever that I know of to be diagnosed with it.
The average death is 41, and most children die of it a lot younger, like his sister as well, at 29.
So you know that you've not got a particularly pleasant future.
How did the knowledge then of discovering that your boys couldn't be yours affect the way you felt towards them, if at all?
They're still my boys, and I still think of them as my sons now, as I have been their dad.
Do you love them as much?
You can't not love somebody simply because, in fact, you know, even you know, if somebody committed some sort of offence against you, if the boys had done something wrong, I'd still love them. You know, but they've done absolutely nothing wrong. They're completely innocent in this as well. They are the victim, like I am. So, of course, yeah, my arms are still open for them, and I would dearly love them to, you know, to come back into my life.
Well, two of them, I understand, aren't in your life because they are cross that you sued your ex-wife, Kate. It's paternity fraud, you said. You won this court case, this settlement of £250,000 from your wife. Why would you risk your relationship with your boys when you say you are their dad, you love them as much, by going ahead with that legal action?
I always brought my boys up to be honest, stand up to bullies, never tell lies. All the time, I was divorced from her for 10 years, and all the time they were with me, all the weekends that they were round at my house, I used to say to them, look, do not keep any secrets from your mum. Be open and honest with her. You know, anything I do, anything I say, I don't mind your mum knowing about it because I want an open, honest relationship with them. So I brought them up to be open, honest, stand up to what you think is right. Somebody committed a 21-year fraud against me.
But not them. And now you've lost two of them. They're not in your life.
But the point is, how do I allow somebody who has committed something like that against me, my ex-wife, to just go off scot-free? Because there are many times...
Because the risk is you lose two of them, and that's what's happened.
But they're grown men. They're grown men. They understand that I have to take action against it.
In families, when there's been tragedy or anything like this, history tends to repeat itself through generations. And Richard wants to ensure that those boys don't think this is normal behaviour. She was completely denying that I wasn't the biological father. So up until the court case only a few weeks ago, she was still saying, even with DNA evidence, I'm sorry, the DNA evidence must be flawed.
And the court case
you're the biological
absolutely
father.
Settled that, yeah.
So if I am the biological father, those boys all have a risk of having cystic fibrosis. They all need to tell their insurance companies, they need to tell their potential partners, their children might have cystic fibrosis. I wouldn't even be allowed to meet them because people with cystic fibrosis cannot meet other people with cystic fibrosis because they cross-infect. Right. So by going via my solicitor, finally, she then, a few weeks ago, said, actually, I accept. You're not the biological father. The boys have got no chance of having cystic fibrosis from me. I can meet them now, and they're free of knowing that they've got a potential genetic disease.
Understood. Do you know who the father is?
I've no idea.
Why have you offered a £5,000 rewards to find out?
I was toying with that as a strategy because what I feel like is 2/5 of my life, 20-odd years of my life, have been a complete lie. The person I thought I was, I'm not. The relationship I had with the boys is not the same as I thought it was. A wife that I thought was loyal, but I had to divorce because we didn't get on, was not. So what I want to do is sit down with this guy and say, were you there in their life? When I was watching them play football, were you there? Did you buy them Christmas presents? How did you deal with the first pregnancy? You know, did you know about the pregnancies? Were you there for the second pregnancy?
You want to meet him and you want to ask those questions?
Yeah, you want to find out what happened. It's almost like you've been in a coma for 20 years and you wake up and you think, God, this guy is a significant participant in my life that I have never met.
OK.
And I have a desire to do that before I die.
Do you know when that will be?
My lungs have deteriorated about 15% in 2 years. And that level of deterioration may be 6 to 10 years.
Thank you very much for coming on the programme. We appreciate it. We wish you all the best as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, one of Britain's greatest living sportsmen has announced he'll soon be hanging up his racket. The three-time Grand Slam winner Andy Murray says he plans to retire after this year's Wimbledon, but fears next week's Australian Open could be the final tournament of his career. The former world #1 has struggled since he had hip surgery last January. He was in tears as he spoke to journalists in Melbourne last night.
So not feeling good. Obviously been struggling for a long time. I've been in a lot of pain for it's been probably about 20 months now. I've pretty much done everything that I could to try and get my hip feeling better, and hasn't helped loads. I'm in a better place than I was 6 months ago, but still in a lot of pain.
Andy, does that mean that this might be your last tournament?
I think there's a chance of that, yeah, for sure. There's a chance of that for sure, because like I said, I'm not sure I'm able to play through the pain, for another 4 or 5 months.
Why didn't someone just go and hug him, bless him? Well, the former British #1, Annabel Croft, told me a little bit earlier on how difficult a moment this must be for Andy Murray.
It was pretty difficult to watch that interview, as you say, very heartbreaking. And I think it's the fact that it's just coming at a time where he is not in control of what he would like to do. He doesn't want to finish his career on these terms. I think he felt like he had so much more to give. And when you think back to his achievements, 3 Grand Slam titles, 2 Wimbledons, 2 Olympic gold medals, a Davis Cup title, and then that year where he really hammered himself to end the year as the world #1 when he beat Novak Djokovic in the finals at the O2. And it just felt as if maybe that was the breaking point. He just pushed his body to the limit, as he always did when he was competing on the court, and he hasn't really ever recovered from it. And I just think it's really heartbreaking, because this is not the way he wants to finish his tennis career.
And you've obviously played at the highest level in tennis. What does it do to you psychologically to know you've got more to give, but your body is essentially giving up on you? What's it going to do to him?
I think it's really, really tough. I mean, fortunately, he has a fantastic family around him. He's got 2 young kids, which are definitely going to keep him occupied for the next few years. And let's face it, he hasn't absolutely announced it just yet that he's going to retire this week. We don't know what's going to happen when he gets on court in Melbourne here this week. But, it does feel like it's very, very close to the end. And I feel like, seeing that raw emotion coming out of him, it feels like it's going to eat away at him a little bit, the fact that he wasn't able to finish on his terms. But I think that, as we all know, he can look back with so much pride on the achievements that he has had in this game, because it's been phenomenal. And I think he's also going to be remembered as one of the most grittiest, braveheart fighters that's out there on the tour, who, was in an incredible era as well. You have to remember, he's been in such a high level era with the likes of Roger Federer, Novak Djokovic, Rafael Nadal himself, and all of them have pushed each other to the mental and physical limits. But, it's just sad that perhaps we have seen his best years, that's for sure.
And I guess as well, he needs to think about those 2 kids that he wants to run round after. I mean, I heard some reports saying that it hurts him even to put his socks on in the morning. So he's got to think about life after tennis as well, and being able to just walk, run around and function.
Well, I think that's right, because sometimes when you watch ceremonies that take place on great centre courts around the world, and you see some of the great players from years gone by walking out there, and a lot of them are sort of on walking sticks and sort of quite crooked when they're walking out, and you think, oh, it's not such a great advert for the sport, because it is a sport that really hammers the joints. And, you know, a lot of the tennis is no longer played on grass courts. You know, obviously we have Wimbledon on the grass, but the rest of the tour is played on quite hammering hard courts, on the clay courts as well, with long drawn out rallies. And it's a sport where you change direction and you have to have a lot of agility, but you're pushing off onto those surfaces. And, you know, when you consider some of the matches that Andy would have played in his career, best of 5 sets, 4 or 5 hours of tennis, you have to recover, come back and do it again in the next round. So it does push the body to the limits. And as you say, you don't want a situation where you can't enjoy life and you can't partake in any sport going forward. And I'm sure that's something that he's considering at the moment. But I think, as we all saw in the press conference, a lot of emotion going round in Andy Murray's head at the moment.
Annabel Croft speaking to me a little bit earlier on. Maria on email says, oh my, I sank into my chair when I saw Sir Andy Murray in his press conference. He has been our best player for a good many years. When he first won Wimbledon, I was jumping for joy, weren't we all, Maria? This is a sad day for Andy and a sad day for Britain. Simon on Twitter says, this is a guy who has given everything in his career. He's not a quitter, and this must be so hard for him. And another text here, so gutted with Andy's announcement. Tennis won't be the same. I'm heartbroken. Love this guy to bits. Well, do get in touch with us about that, about Andy Murray, also about the Universal Credit story we've been talking about this morning. You can use the hashtag Victoria Live. If you want to email us, you can do. Just remember that if you want to come on the programme, put your contact details, your phone number in there. And also remember that if you text us, you're going to be charged at the standard network rate. Now, the murder and rape of a 6-year-old girl called Zainab in Pakistan caused outrage this time last year. There were angry riots on the streets of the city where she lived, whilst on social media, people across the world called for justice to be done. Well, many saw the publicity around the case as a potential turning point for the tackling of child abuse in a country where the topic is rarely openly discussed. But did it actually lead to any change? Sukunda Kamani has been back to Zainab's hometown to find out.
6-year-old Zainab was last seen alive in this CCTV footage, being led away from a street near her home by the man who would murder her. She was one of over half a dozen victims of a serial child killer, loose in the city of Kasur. When her body was discovered days later, furious crowds poured out into the streets, blaming police for not doing enough to stop the attacks. The case dominated headlines. In a socially conservative country, many hoped the attention would raise awareness about child abuse. Now, a year on, I want to see whether the tragic murders here have had a lasting impact. Zainab's mother still keeps her daughter's school uniform in the room they once shared. She tells me she's struggling to come to terms with her loss.
You know what mothers are like. If someone even slaps your child, it hurts you so much.
This is the man who killed Zainab, 24-year-old Imran Ali. He was arrested, then executed last October. Zainab's family believe they have now received justice, but say more still needs to be done to prevent other children being abused.
There
are still so many incidents happening. We need more CCTV cameras, and the government should introduce a program into the school curriculum, raising awareness about child abuse.
I don't think anything has changed. The situation is just as bad as it was before. As soon as you turn the TV on, you hear stories of other cases like ours. I can't bear to watch them. The children have different names, but I feel as if they are saying Zainab's name. Everyone says have patience, but I ask them, where can I get patience from? I still feel Zainab's presence at home.
Zainab's body was discovered in this rubbish dump. She was one of 8 young girls to be attacked by the same man. The case did provoke a national discussion on child abuse, but many here still don't feel comfortable talking openly about the subject, and victims often don't get the support that they need. This man's daughter was assaulted by the same man who killed Zainab. She survived, but is still recovering from her ordeal. We aren't showing his face to protect his daughter's identity.
If a door slams, she gets scared. Anytime she sees a stranger, she's terrified. She runs inside the house and closes the door. If anyone even raises their voice, she gets scared. She's been like that ever since the incident.
Her father says they were given some financial compensation, but have never been offered psychological support. His daughter was even told to visit the attacker in jail to try and identify him.
He was inside his cell. The judge was there as well as 2 policemen. She started shaking and gasping for breath.
आपने सोचा कि ये आपकी बेटी जेल में नहीं जानी चाहिए थी उसको देखने के लिए?
No, she shouldn't have gone.
At this school in Kasur, they are now taking action. The head teacher is talking to pupils about what to do if someone tries to touch them inappropriately. It's part of a new scheme in the city, introduced in the past few weeks.
It's way ahead.
Newly appointed Deputy Commissioner Wasima Umar is the official behind the project.
What is important is that we communicate. We communicate with our children at home, at school. Also, we need to, awareness is the key. We need to talk about issues that at the moment are no-go zones.
And has that become easier after the publicity around the Zainab case?
Highlighting the Zainab case, of course, has helped us in bringing more focus on how parents should pay attention and the teachers should pay attention to what is happening with the children once they're out of homes.
She says they've also introduced a counselling service for victims in the last month. When I told her we had spoken to families who had never been offered support, she promised to take action.
What we are going to do is reach out to those families, talk to those children. I, for instance, personally would like to see them and counsel them because I've been a student of psychology myself.
According to one leading charity, on average, around 12 children are abused every day in Pakistan. At times, some end up repeating the behaviour, creating a vicious cycle. A source involved in the investigation into Zainab's murder told me the killer himself had been abused throughout his childhood. It's hard to think of someone responsible for so many horrific crimes as having once been a victim. But perhaps if he'd been able to access support when he was younger, none of this would have ever happened. On the anniversary of Zainab's death, her father has organised a rally in memory of his daughter. The government has promised to pass a bill named after her, improving the way police deal with child abuse cases. Her parents and residents here hope some good can come out of this tragedy.
Now, 16 years since it first began, BBC Music's Sound of list is back again, fitting the most exciting rising stars in music. Previous winners include, well, of course, Sigrid, who we spoke to. Now, the aim is to predict some of the biggest global superstars of 2019. And this year's winner is Octavian. He's here. And before we talk to him, let's get a flavour of his music.
How you feel? How you feel? The money gon' look right left. The money gon' look right. My belly got full, now I got that meal. I feel good, I feel alive. Higher, push it, higher, push it, higher, push it. How you feel now? What are you feeling? The money gon' look right left. The money gon' look. I got bigger. I used to be in it.
Well, Octavian is here, as you can see, getting down to his own music, and also we are joined by BBC Music reporter Mark Savage. Thanks ever so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
What does it mean to win this when you look at the likes of the other stars who are all behind us who've come before you?
I just think it's I feel very undeserving of it, to be honest. Like, it's very early in my career and I haven't really done that much, but it's just very exciting for me. It's very, I appreciate it very much.
Does it put pressure on you when you see the success of the others?
Do you know what? I feel like I have one road and I feel like everything's aligned for me. Like, this time last year, Drake shouted me out. Exactly this time last year, so it was just like...
Yeah, I mean, for people who haven't seen that, Drake was basically loving your music at the after party of the Golden Globes. Yeah. I mean, that puts you on a whole new trajectory,
right?
Doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And there was nothing I could do about that, do you know what I'm saying? It just came to me and I just feel very appreciative of it, so, yeah.
And you have got an incredible backstory. I mean, you were born in France, Angolan heritage, came to London when you were 3 and found yourself homeless before you really got into the music business. What has that done to your desire and your music?
Well, coming from such a low place where, you know what I mean, I had 0.00p in my account, I had no food, I had no clothes, and to be here right now, it just shows me that anything's possible, that I can achieve more than I think, do you know what I'm saying? And, you know, there's a lot of people out there that think because of the situation that they're in, it's impossible to get to another situation. Well, it's not. It's like, it's very possible. It just depends on your mind state and on your heart, and you can get there no matter what. It's crazy.
How do you seriously turn it around, though, from being homeless to being signed?
Do you know what? I just feel like it was all mentality, and it was all just focusing on the end goal and focusing on my determination and just blocking everything else out. Do you know what I'm saying? It's all about like your self-belief.
And Mark, this can't be underestimated how significant it is for Octavian to win this.
No, I mean, it shines a huge spotlight on you. There are 20,000 songs uploaded to Spotify every day, so it's really hard in the music industry now to get your voice heard. So being selected by the 136 DJs and festival bookers and TV pluggers who make up the panel and the sound off really shines a spotlight on you, and it helps you get more interviews like this one. It drives more people to listen to your music. It's just a big step up.
And it's interesting as well because you're the first rapper to win since 50 Cent.
Since 50 Cent, that's crazy, isn't it?
And that's quite a while ago, let's be honest.
Big up 50 Cent, wherever you are, big up, you know what I'm saying?
But I mean, going forward this year, what are your big plans for the year?
My plans are just to keep on making music, keep on making visuals. For the people who don't know me, I'm a very diverse artist. Like, I don't just make one music. I don't like to be pigeonholed as like a rapper or, oh, this guy's a grime artist. I hate to be pigeonholed. So I make every single type of music in fashion. I wear every single type of thing. I'm saying I don't like to be put into one box and that's it. So you can expect a lot of diversity from me this year and yeah, a lot of different things. Do you know what I'm saying?
Best of luck and thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you very
also,
much.
Mark, for coming in as well. We're coming up to the end of the programme, but lots of you getting in touch on universal credit, which we've been talking about today. Linda on the text says, some comments imply those on universal credit are not working. That's wrong. They're on low wages and they're topped up because their employers don't pay a living wage. The ignorance is part of the problem. Also, lots of people getting in touch about that dad who sued his wife because found out his 3 sons weren't actually his. Linda on text said, if you love his kids and they think he's their dad, why sue for money? He is wrong. Thanks for your company today. BBC Newsroom Live is coming up next, and have a lovely weekend.